So I'm continuing my series of MASH retro reviews for Season 2, Episode 22, George. So, to begin with, this episode is probably one of the most progressive episodes of MASH. It tackles a subject that in the 1970s was still largely taboo, as I understand it, and a subject that definitely was taboo in the 1950s. Now, before I continue, because of my own life experience, I'm not the best person to talk about this. So I'm going to be linking in the cards and in the description a video from the channel Matt Baum. I hope I pronounced that right. I apologize if I did. That talks about this episode way better than I ever could. So let's go really discuss what this episode is about. So the titular character George, he comes into the camp, in combat evac and all that. And besides his combat wounds, he also has lots of other bruises that came from members of his own unit. He decides he can trust Hawkeye and tells him that there's been 2 people in his unit that were beat up, a colored person and a homosexual. Hawkeye's response, "So you're a Negro." That is a very deliberate language on Hawkeye's part, and also on George Weston, that his last name's his part as well. Neither of them can outright say it, but they both understand. I should mention, George's skin color is my skin color, white. He's not a black American. And if you are picking up on what I'm saying, you are picking up on what the episode is saying. Nowadays, we have no problems saying that someone is, well, we generally don't use the term homosexual anymore in society. We use the term gay or lesbian for women. We typically use that. Some people will use slurs too. I bet Frank would. Because Frank's story in this is he wants to get George dishonorably discharged for that. Hawkeye and Chopper oppose it, so they basically fake fight and get Frank to reveal that he paid for test answers for a medical exam, and they use that to blackmail him to destroy his report and not send it up the chain of command. I should also mention, this episode also has an example of a character who supports the policy of don't ask, don't tell. That's Henry. When Frank goes to Henry about this, Henry's response is, "Has he made a pass at you or anyone?" And no, George hadn't. I think George values consent. So Henry definitely takes a position of that don't ask, don't tell, since nobody's been asked, and as far as Henry knows, George never told anyone. It's just gossip. Henry does not care. He thinks it's a frivolous endeavor. Now, how would he have responded if George had made a pass at someone? I don't know. Henry's presented as the more moderate character that is paying attention to the actions rather than the words in this situation. Well, Hawkeye and Chapel, even if George had asked somebody out, they wouldn't have cared. Actually, Hawkeye might have been flattered too, depending on how you view his character. And lots of people debate if Hawkeye is, a standard heterosexual or bi. There's a lot of debate that I've discovered among certain groups in the fandom. Really, I'm learning a lot about MASH by doing these reviews. And that's actually what I really want to transition to talking about in this video. Though before I do that, I do want to mention one other thing. Apparently, originally when they made this episode, the writers were initially intending to have Frank reveal. I got this off the MASH wiki, by the way. It is linked to a source, so hopefully it's accurate. So apparently the wiki mentioned that original intention of the writers was to have Frank admit that he once had an attraction to another man, but the network shot it down. And I actually kind of agree with the network on that. The network probably didn't want to show one of its main characters being gay. However, I think it's better because they already, a lot with Frank, use the feminized villain trope, and if they made Frank have that revelation, that would have almost undermined the message that they were trying to tell. So I actually agree with the network, but probably for a different reason, because I'm looking at it as what they're trying to say. Now, I don't mind Frank being a hypocrite. In fact, there's a joke from the Hawkeye and Chapel that the reason why Frank requested not to have George on his rounds anymore was because, he got excited every time. That was intended as a joke, and it could be true. They do portray Frank more feminine than a lot of the other male characters on MASH. But again, I'm glad that they changed the blackmail to blackmailing him as, for medical fraud or medical exam fraud rather than something else, because that would have seemed out of character for Hardcore and Chopper based off of what they were doing in this episode and just some other stuff as well. But going back to what this episode has taught me about MASH and this experience of doing retro reviews as a whole. To begin with, there's generally considered to be 2 or 3 eras of MASH. We have the seasons 1 through 3 with Henry Blake, and then we have the rest of the show with Colonel Potter, but you can also divide with Frank and without Frank. That those middle episodes with both Frank and Potter can be viewed as their own separate era from the other two, depending on how you view it. But most MASH fans prefer the later seasons once we get Potter. And one is, I think we got stronger characters, but another thing is we get more hard-hitting episodes like this one. We get more episodes that challenge our perception, that make us think about things that we may not have had thought before because of our own life experiences. I live a pretty safe suburban lifestyle in America. I have not had to deal with persecution for anything like that. So those things in here that I wouldn't relate to, but it can make me think. And this episode is really the highs of the early season. I've said this in a couple other videos, but the inklings of what MASH will become are in this episode, but there's a lot more other episodes. This is definitely one of the episodes. Another one is Sometimes You Hear the Bird, where I think the word I'm looking for is where what MASH has become, or what MASH will become, becomes way more forefront in a part of the episodes. But many a times what MASH will become is hidden in a line of dialogue, is hidden in one scene and just doesn't get explored. And this episode shows that really, and same thing with Sometimes You Hear the Bird, that what MASH will become, the seeds were always there to begin with. It was only as new writers came in and as new characters joined, replacing old characters, that those seeds bore fruit and became the MASH that we know. Granted, some people do prefer the more crass earlier seasons, but as shown by this episode, the early seasons aren't at all crass, and I've gained through this entire process, not just this episode, a new appreciation for the early episodes, the early seasons of MASH. An appreciation I don't think I had before. Granted, I'm just waiting for season 3. I think it's episode 12. I got some thoughts about that episode, but that's a very different episode. We're going to be getting there in time, and hopefully I get the right one in my head. There are some other things we could address, small moments here and there, but I think I've said most of what I wanted to say about this episode. So if you have any insights, any thoughts you would like to leave, let me know them in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the force be with you, always.